Hello everybody, welcome to tonight's stream of the Art Lounge Alley. I'm your host, and this is Figure Drawing Basics, part 118. And here is where I left off yesterday. So for those of you who are tuning in for the very first time, what is it exactly that you're looking at here? And I'm going to go over it real quick. Actually, today is the last day of the week. This is going to be the last stream for the week. So I'm going to do like a quick overview of what I talked about this week. Predominantly, I'm going to say it was about, let's see here. You guys are going to get to see some previews of really old, terrible drawings. Well, for starters, we were talking about how you can use the block form as a way to shape out the entire drawing. It's a lot easier to draw a box than it is to draw a face as your starting point. So making sure that the face is the right size for whatever it is that you're working on. For example, if you start working in comics, you're going to have to fit the figure specifically where you need it to be at a specific size. So how do you go about doing that? For a lot of people who are starting out, the way they picture drawing is by following a line until you eventually complete it all around, and hopefully it looks right. But if you're going to do it within a panel, within a limited amount of space, you want to make sure that it does before you complete the drawing, before you spend time really going into detail. So a quick way to go about it is, as I mentioned, using the block form, block shape, or any other basic shape in order to be able to quickly sketch it out. It's a lot faster to do a circle, it's a lot faster to do a triangle or a square or whatever, than it is to like really go into a lot of detail and then having to erase it because it just doesn't fit exactly where you need it to be. So it's a quick way to do it. You're establishing parameters, you're establishing its placement without sacrificing too much time. And then from there, once you get it exactly where you want it to be, as you could see, you could start forming the face. So that's one of the benefits of using the block form. Another benefit of it is that it's useful for things like perspective. So you could see here, this front of the building, I'm going to say, right, is going to be the front plane, the front plane of the face. And that's just to let you know, okay, from this point on, going this way, the object starts to curve, or the subject starts to curve more. It starts to take 3-dimension. So it turns a flat drawing kind of into a 3-dimensional drawing for you, in order for you to start visualizing things better, for things like shading, for things like even detail on a face. You want to make sure, let's say, for it to not go past this line when you're drawing the eye. That's a good guide for you, and also for a perspective as well. So as you notice, when you're drawing the face in a frontal perspective, you could see that the ears are right on the same line as the eyebrows. Whereas here, if you were to draw that straight line, let's say going this way, it's going to be higher. The brow is going to be higher than the ear. That's because the face is in perspective. It's in a 3/4 view. As you can see, it's not like this. It's at an angle. And because it's at an angle, everything starts to shift. You're no longer seeing it head on. So using this block form allows you to make sure that things are still lined up properly. It still looks correct. So as you see, this line is for the eyebrows, and it is angled as well. As you can see, everything is angled. The eye line, the line for the nostrils, and kind of helps to have these like guiding lines to show you that. And since you have the lines parallel to each other going across the front plane, right, as we were discussing, this is a plane, this is a plane, it then continues to follow the direction of this top line right here. So you see how this top line is showing this perspective. So everything else kind of takes that same direction. It's parallel to that. That's one way of doing it. That's one way of establishing the lines for the face. Really, if you were to trace these lines, they would go outside of the frame to a point of the horizon line. So this is the horizon line right here. So I'm not going to get too much into it. I'm going to just focus more on the block form right now, and also planes. So you guys got an understanding of the block form. You could see how it's used in other areas as well, as you could see in these little examples here. It's also really useful for any part of the body, really, when it comes to feet, when it comes to hands, as I'm going to show you real quick. Even when it comes to other objects as well. So for instance, if you want to draw a car, it's really useful. You want to kind of start paying attention around to your surroundings when you're walking around, let's say on the street, or even when you're watching movies. Look at objects, look at things around besides just the person, and try to see, or in your mind picture, like, what's the most simple shape that I could use that would just kind of summarize the entire thing. So for a car, for example, it would be a cube, right? It would be a rectangular cube. So for like a vase, you would use, let's say, a circle for its base, and then you would add more of like a cylinder shape at the top of it. Just to give you guys another example of something else. So just kind of look around and get used to seeing things that way, because then you can start, the more you practice that, the more it's going to be easier for you when you're approaching a subject in drawing. It's really helpful. As I said, it's a time saver, and it allows you to be more organized with your drawing. You're not going to spend as much time erasing, struggling with it, hoping, crossing your fingers that intuitively you'll make the right lines. Once you understand the structure, once you understand its proper proportion and how it looks right, you'll more and more you will become intuitive about correcting things or going to them. Just the same way as when you're reading. You first started out being very organized about how you study the alphabet, how you study grammar, writing, spelling, and now you don't have to think about that, right? You don't have to sit there and recite the alphabet or recite words or look them up anymore, or have to write them out before you actually pronounce them. It just naturally comes to you. So that's what's going to happen as well. And don't worry, you're going to become more intuitive about it eventually, once your eye gets more and more used to seeing things in their proper perspective, in their proper placement, etc. So that's a good example for the head. I'm going to see if I could find... Here's another example of using the block form, but this time for the hand. This is another example, terrible example, old drawing. I'm going to say it's 10 years old, but you could kind of see how it's using like the cube as a way of like constructing it. But yeah, here going back to this, it also helps with, as I mentioned, shading, because now you could picture, okay, if the light source is coming from the bottom it's going to hit this and this area and this, but this is going to start going into shadow. You know, maybe some of the light is going to be here, but this is going to be in shadow. So it really helps with that as well. And also, you know, when it comes to the fingers, they're pretty complicated because there's 5 fingers and they all change according to perspective. You know, they're jotting out, so the perspective sort of makes them look different depending on what that position of the hand is. So block form really helps with that as well. You know, that's something that I was showing you guys before, starting out with a cube and then adding these other cubes on top of it as like building blocks to eventually get everything right. I'm going to be showing more of that today, but as I mentioned, this is just like an overview of like what I've been going over this entire week. I'm going to say that's pretty much it. You know, for the rest of the time, I was just drawing different examples of hands. You know, I think it's important to have a variety, right? It's important to, as you can see, it's all around here. It's important to have something new, something fresh to work on. You know, you don't want to keep doing the same drawing. Like, let's say you're drawing this hand over and over and over again. You'll get good at it, but it's going to get a little bit daunting, right? So it's nice to have all these examples, not only to keep it fresh, not only to keep it interesting, but also to understand, let's say, when it comes to the hand, all the different positions that it's in. And as I mentioned, the more you draw it, the more you're going to get used to it visually. You know, you're really focusing, you're spending time, you're getting down all these detail, and that process ingrains itself into your head. Like that focus really imprints that image more into your head. So, you know, you might not be, let's say you might not feel like you're grasping it, but because of that studious approach, you know, because of the concentration and constantly looking at the image and working on it, adjusting things, it really starts to ingrain itself into your memory. So when you sit down and you draw, let's say, and you draw a hand from imagination, or you look at somebody else's drawing of the hand, you'll intuitively sort of start seeing like, this doesn't look right, that doesn't look like. It's like a subconscious sort of recognition because of the fact that you studied all this stuff, or you drew it and spent so much time. So, you know, there's 2 things at work. You know, it's your hand-eye coordination, it's the process of actually drawing it, and it's verbal understanding, as well as like logical and psychological understanding of it, that come into play and have you really understand all this stuff. If one is lacking, the other one really helps, you know. So if you're not really grasping it verbally, by practicing it over and over and over again, you instill it intuitively, and that really starts to help. But that's why it's important to approach it in this like really technical way, so that you can ingrain the right perspective, the right angle, you know, the right way of drawing it into your mind, as opposed to doing it incorrectly each and every time, and then every time you sit down to draw it, you're drawing it incorrectly. So that pretty much does it. I'm going to say I'm going to continue on. I'm going to do a couple of examples using that block form that I was talking about that could really help, by starting out right here in this little section. So again, doing a quick little gesture drawing using the block form. Notice it's like a cube now, right? We've got a cube going on over here. Added this little section as the padding for the finger, for the thumb rather. Then I'm gonna divide this cube into 4 sections by making these 3 lines there, and I'm gonna start constructing from it. Now I'm pressing a little bit harder so that you guys can see, but really you want to get used to being light about it. Now, for those of you who are just starting out, it can be intimidating and it could look messy. You know, you're looking at this and there's like so many lines interlapping. It can be kind of frustrating because you might lose track of like the lines that you're trying to pay attention to. But it's important to push through it. You know, keep practicing it. Try to draw more simplified examples. You know, what I'm doing right now, the fingers are kind of like, they're like covering each other, you know, in this perspective. It's a complicated perspective, so it could be more intimidating for those of you who are just learning. So pick something that's a lot more simple. I'm just using this as an example to show that even in most complicated perspectives, that this becomes really useful, and it's possible to actually do. And notice how I'm creating these blocks from the divided sections. So there were 4 sections. I just extended from them. So here I'm following along with the idea of how you could notice at the bottom it's a lot thicker than it is at the top of the palm. So I'm showing that here. I'm drawing that here. Adding the thumb. And then from here, you know, now I got this block formed down. From here, I could start making adjustments. None of this is supposed to be permanent. Obviously, you could see how blocky, right, this whole drawing is. But again, it's just there as a visual aid. Now you could, once you've established all of this, you could come back to it and start connecting joints, rounding off corners, refining lines. It's just really, as I mentioned, it's a good guide rather than a finished product. I'm going to do another example, but this time I'm going to draw bigger. Because I feel like because I was trying to fit it into the section, I drew it a little too small, so it might not be the best visual aid for you guys, but I'm going to clean it up, and that way you guys can get a better view of what the final result of it is. So I'm going to draw through. You can see I'm drawing through the fingers to ensure that the other side is the same. And that's a really important tool as well, to draw through. It doesn't only come in handy when it comes to drawing hands holding objects. It also comes in handy for other perspectives of the human figure. And you guys will see me do that from time to time. I'll point it out more often. But it just ensures consistency in perspective in whatever it is that you're working on. Another really important overview here is the, I guess, perspective on the hands, or some anatomical concepts when it comes to the hands. So do this with yourself as well, you know, because this is, once again, like everything else when it comes to human anatomy, it varies. There's a lot of variation. And perfect example, something I recently discovered actually, is that on this hand, as you could see, the ring finger and the index finger, they're almost the same size, with the, I'm going to say the ring finger being slightly longer, right? You see that? Now check this out. This finger, the index finger, is shorter in this case, or the ring finger is longer. I'm going to say the ring finger is just longer because when you put the index fingers together, they're about the same size. You know, looking at these, they kind of line up, right? Whoops. I guess I got to lower it. So yeah, you could see the ring fingers here is different. So one of them is longer than the other. So just an example of how it varies. You know, it's a little bit of it's a little tricky to see, but if you pay attention to this, they're about the same here, but in this case, they're not. So every person probably has like a little bit of a difference in when it comes to the length of the fingers, but what I think is more common is the length of the fingers in comparison to the palm. So here I'm going to measure the longest finger, being the middle finger, and I'm going to see how long it is in comparison to the palm. Like, should they be longer than the palm? And that's going to be a resounding no. I'm going to say for the entire palm, it goes from where it bends, right, where the wrist is, to the base of where the fingers are right here. So by measuring this, it doesn't even come close to that. That's like a good 1.5 inches, I'm going to say, away from the wrist area. So my fingers would have to be like this long in order for them to match, you know, my palm size. You know, they would have to be pretty long. So your fingers, I'm going to say, for the most part, for most people, are going to be shorter than your palm. So look out for that. That's an important detail to recognize. Also, here's another thing that is important to note. Because of, like, you're seeing a lot of curvature here, right? How the fingers are grabbing an object, how they wrap around an object. Notice something really important, and this is a common problem with a lot of people, even intermediate people, you know, people who are great at drawing the torso, let's say the face, muscles, all that stuff. But when it comes to the hands, you could see that they don't quite understand how they function when it comes to drawing them. So how does it fold, right? A lot of people make the mistake of thinking that this right here is a fold, that you could actually fold your fingers at this point. But that's not the case, and you'll see exactly. I'm going to do it in perspective here. I'm going to do it to the side. So the first fold, right, you can't do the top right here unless there's some pressure going against it, and even then you can't really quite curl them. So the first one is right down the middle. The second one is now the tips of the finger, and then the third, notice it's not here. The third comes from the knuckle. See that? So you don't want to create the bend coming from there. You know, you don't want the knuckle to be in this area right by where the crease is. It's further down from the crease if you pay attention. So the last crease on the fingers is here. The knuckle is further down. That's a really, really important thing to notice. So see that right here. So the third bend, so it's 1, 2, 3 is at the knuckle, and that's really important. You'll see some people drawing this like they're holding, let's say, a sword or something, and they're holding it this way. People aren't grasping it. They're really confused by this idea. So really important to recognize, study from your own hand. When you're drawing something, let's say you're drawing something from imagination, you're drawing a character holding something, look at your own hand, look at how it functions and try to mimic that in your drawing. Understand how it functions, not just in the perspective that you're trying to draw, but really how it works. Where are the bends? What happens once it does bend? The knuckle comes out. What does the knuckle next to it look like, etc. All right, so a couple of helpful hints there for you guys, some visual cues. I'm gonna get back to drawing more. More fingers, more hands. So I'm pretty much done with this drawing, but as you saw, right, I started out with using a cube, just a cube, some blocks basically between divisions, and then it eventually started to form a nail, fingers, and a whole hand. So it's absolutely possible. It's a really good technique to practice to get a better understanding of, because you're going to be utilizing it for a lot of things, especially when it comes to perspective. When you're drawing the figure in perspective in some way. Incredibly useful. Notice also how the fingers here, right, once they fold, they don't go downwards, all going symmetrically downwards. The pinky goes inwards. You notice that? So when I make this tight fold, you could see that it doesn't go down with the rest of them. It actually goes inwards. And this is something that's like a slight visual detail that people overlook because it's so subtle. It's not really extreme. That bend inwards isn't really extreme, so people overlook it. So you could see like the outer side of the hand. It's not being covered by the finger. So that's another hint similar to this. Pay attention to that. It's a really, really important detail. It can make or break your drawing. You could draw everything really realistic, really render out the fingers, get it right, and then bam, like not having that in the right perspective automatically makes the viewer kind of feel something's off. Something isn't right. So that's a really, really important detail. I'm going to go over some do's and don'ts in just a few minutes. I'm going to do like another example here to give you guys a better understanding of this this block form. Maybe do it like a little bit further down here. So for the visual aid, I'm just going to, I think this is a really good one because it's not overly complex. And you could see them in perspective. You could see the fingers in perspective here. And it's going to help with the block form here. So the fingers are extending outwards. And I'm going to do another block form right on top of it. This way. Also notice, similar to how over here it starts out more narrow and widens out towards the base, it's the same thing with the fingers. it's pretty narrow at the top and widens out towards the base. So it just continues narrow to wide, narrow to wide. So the same thing here, narrow to wide, narrow to wide. And now I'm just going to continue. As you see, like there's this little block area right here, right? This little square, I'm going to say. I'm just going to extend the lines from there, connecting them at the top. I'm going to do the same thing here, extend them upwards. It's a little bit more challenging to see those lines behind, and it doesn't really serve much purpose there because they're connected tightly together. So I'm just going to continue on with those lines here. But you could see how I divided those sections evenly, so the fingers are evenly in place. Now I'm just gonna make connections here. Notice how I'm going to do a quick little measurement here, making sure it's not the same size as the palm. Okay. So here, yeah, what I was getting at was notice how there's variation with the fingers, right? And the curvature also. It's not just going straight across. There's variation in size. Same thing for the middle section. It also has curvature to it. It's not just straight across for these sections. And even at the base, if you look at it internally, there's curvature to it. It's not just going straight. So I'm kind of, right now it looks that way because again, we're at this like very basic, very simplified version of the hand, of the fingers as well. But I am including the variation within this block form. As you could see, I'm just kind of constructing it on top of it, or inside of it rather. And now I'm just creating those divisions for the fingers. So pretty much the basic shape of it all is done. And now, like before, I'm going to start forming it more to look more natural, more realistic, not as geometric. But if it's safe to say things are in place. You know, the width of the palm isn't incredibly wide or too narrow. I made sure that all the fingers are about the same width. You know, I had space in order to make sure that they vary in size. So all these things are checked off. Looks right. Now it's safe for me to go into detail. There's less likely a chance that I'm going to have to make any like real hard adjustments here. So the hard part is done. I like to say this is the part where you're just beautifying the image. You're making it look good. So some things aren't going to be exact. You know, there's going to be a little bit less things are going to maybe slim up a little bit, or rather slim down, right? I'm adding curvature to all the different joints, different areas for the joints. Add the wrists here. So I gradually started to press harder and harder in areas where I feel more confident. That's one of the best things about drawing out lightly. Like, I actually spent, I pressed a lot harder than I normally would, because I want you guys to actually see it, to see the process, to see it develop. But I would draw it a lot lighter than this. So that's one of the reasons why it's great to do that, to start out light, so that way as you're constructing it, as you're taking it from step 1 to 2, 3, and 4, the lines aren't as confusing. You know, they start to take more precedence over the other lines as you define things. Whereas if you draw everything in the same strength, the lines are all in the same, are made with the same amount of strength, then it becomes really confusing, right? Visually, you're just like, oh, I don't know which ones to choose now. My eyes are kind of everywhere. So it's helpful to do it really lightly, and that way, towards the end, it's easier for you to polish the right lines. So it's a pretty good example, I'm gonna say, just to show you guys from start to finish using the block form how it could help you construct things in the correct perspective. You know, I didn't spend too much time in the beginning. I made sure everything is kind of lined up properly using the box form, but as you could see at the result has more fluidity to it. The lines have more curvature, whereas at the beginning it was really geometric, right? It had this like very mechanical sort of look to it. So it's just just goes to show that, you know, it doesn't have to end up looking that way. It could actually help you construct a really nice fluid sort of finish. And as I mentioned, this is like the fun part. You're not worried about perspective, you're not worried about like the anatomy as much. It's just refining lines, you know. It comes down to that at this point. And this is like where the creativity really starts to kick in. Because you feel really secure about the drawing and its appearance. So you just kind of start having fun with it. That's what I do. I end up having fun with it. I make some lines, define some lines, stylize some lines. There you go. There you have it. A great example for block drawing from start to finish. I'm going to continue on doing a couple of more. It is slowly coming to an end for figure drawing basics, everybody, which means that the special intro is coming up next. I'm really excited about it. I've been waiting all week to get back to this. I'm going to be continuing on with Gil Elvgren. He's one of my most favorite illustrators, pinup artists. He has beautiful work, as you guys have seen, for those of you who are tuning in because you've seen the social media advertisement for it. He has incredible painting skills, beautiful women. Not only is he great at painting, he's excellent in understanding the female figure, just everything in general, you know, composition, the mood, you know, the rendering of it, painting, oil painting, which is really difficult. Lots of tasks there. He's excellent at all of it. You guys can catch up on the first, parts 1 through 7 by heading over to the video section and filtering it by collection, and you're going to see that a bunch of folders are going to pop up. And one of them is going to be called Special Streams and Moments, I believe, or that could be on YouTube. But Special Streams is going to be in both folders, on YouTube and on Twitch. And over there, you guys will find parts 1 through 7. And I talk about Gil Elvgren, and in the very beginning, I show you guys a little bit of the work, some examples of it. I talk about Gil Elvgren's history, him growing up, what kind of artists he was influenced by, and then I go into depth about each and every artist that influenced him, and point out areas where it seems that Gil Elvgren picked up or was inspired by their work in those areas, and just talking about illustration history. I have a blast. I think it's a lot of fun, and I introduce you guys to all sorts of artists of that era and of that subject choice. You know, there's a lot of glamour art there. There's a lot of history as well. You guys are getting like basically like a glimpse into history, glimpse into the early 20th century period, what the fashion was like, you know, all that stuff is present. I talk a lot about that. So yeah, that's in the video section, that's in the special folders stream. But next it's going to be part 8. And I'm going to be introducing you guys to a new artist this time. Last week I was finishing up JC Landecker, another favorite artist of mine that I've discovered through this venture. Absolutely love his art. But last week I've completed it, and today is going to be another artist. This is a new artist that influenced Gil Elvgren. And it would be interesting to talk about him, to give you guys a brief history about who he was, like what kind of stuff he's done. It's going to be a blast. So make sure you tune in right after. I'm going to take a quick 5-minute break. Not just yet, but soon. And then I'm going to come back for that special intro. And there's a lot more to come. There's a lot more special intros to come, especially next week. I can't wait for next week because I'm going to be introducing you guys to a new special intro. It's not going to be related to Gil Elvgren. It's going to be something else. It's very cool. And it opens up a whole can of like artistic concepts and ideas and philosophies and artists. So it's a whole new experience that I can't wait to share with you guys and talk about. And it's going to be next week. I'm going to say next Wednesday. That's going to be the case. Over this weekend, I'm just gonna continue on with more drawing. I feel like I'm on a roll. I'm getting a lot of stuff done, and to be honest, I just really enjoy it. It's not even just about practicing and maintaining practice. It's just more and more fun. You know, you do tend to get faster. It's like reading as well, right? Like, in the beginning, you're really slow with words and you're enunciating all of it, and grammar might seem confusing, but once you get the grasp of it, once you start reading more, it just becomes fun. It's not about reading, it's about the material. You know, it's about what you're reading and the story, the characters, like all that stuff. It really starts to come into play. So this is kind of the same case. Like, it's not so much about the anatomy and perspective. It just becomes about the process of like creating something, making it look convincing, and really how it feels as well. Like, I think that's one of the biggest things when it comes to drawing. I really like how I mentioned it often, how the lead feels on paper. Just that experience alone makes it very pleasurable and fun. You know, like I enjoy that sensation, I'm gonna say. Same thing with brushes, you know, if I'm working with actual brushes. So beyond just the results, you know, beyond what I'm creating and the idea that comes to life, it's also just the act of all that that I really enjoy. And taking time away from the desk becomes unpleasant almost. Like, I really want to get back into it. You know, I feel like if I go a day without doing anything, just feels like something is off, if that's a good explanation for it. So I'm going to be continuing on with that. I have been actually going doing more work for drawing comics. Like I'm kind of sucks that I only do it once a week now, whereas before I was doing it 5 days a week. So I'm just kind of like doing it off stream and having a good time with it on my own. So I'm probably going to do more of that along with other projects that I'm currently working on. And I hope you guys are inspired by all of this to do the same. You know, just draw, just have a good time, and keep leveling up. All right, everybody. I'm gonna take a quick 5-minute break. I'll be back at 9 p.m. on the dot. But thanks for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and if you did, if this does help you in some way, if you're enjoying the content, just remember to hit the like and subscribe button. They're both greatly appreciated, and they help the stream grow. So I will see you guys in the next stream. Hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight's special intro. It's actually just going to be a special stream. I'm pretty sure it's going to go on throughout the entire stream, and it's a continuation of Gil Elvgren. He's one of my favorite illustrators. He's an amazing painter, and I'm going to show you guys, for those of you who are just tuning in for the very first time, it's going to be a brief introduction about who Gil Elvgren was. So that is Gil Elvgren right there, 1914 to 1980. I have this amazing collection, this book that I have, and I decided to go in depth and talk about his journey, his influences, and his accomplishments in general, how much influence he had on illustration of that period. So just to start out and give you guys a better understanding, he was the most important pinup and glamour artist of the 20th century. One of his most recognizable works is from his Coca-Cola illustrations. Gil Elvgren's Coca-Cola subjects portrayed the American dream of a secure, comfortable lifestyle. But he's well known for illustrations for magazine stories, often capturing the timeless scenes that reflected the hopes, fears, and joys of their readers. In the field of advertising, alongside his Coca-Cola work, he contributed to campaigns for prominent American companies and products such as Orange Crush, Schultz Beer, Sealy Mattress, General Electric, Sylvania, and Napa Auto Parts. With his work for the Brown and Bigelow, the Coca-Cola, and other national advertising assignments, and his magazine work, Elvgren was much in demand as an artist. His time booked up more than a year ahead of his output. Elvgren also stood out not just for his painting and advertising graphics. He was also a notable professional photographer, and you guys will see that as the slideshow goes. You'll see some examples of his photography that he used to create these amazing paintings. So long before he attended his first art class in 1933, Elvgren had been impressed by the early pretty girl illustrators like Charles Donna Gibson, Howard Chandler Christie, Harrison Fisher, as well as McClellan Barkley, Haddon H. Sundblom, huge influence, Andrew Loomis, another amazing artist, Charles E. Chambers, and Pruitt Carter. And you guys can check out all of these illustrators that I was talking about. I go into depth about each and every one of them. I show you guys their paintings. I talk about their history as well. You could check that out by heading over to the video section and filtering it based on collection, where you will find a folder called Special Streams. And in that folder, you'll see parts 1 through 7 for you guys to catch up. Each and every one of them is unique. Each and every one has something really interesting to show, to talk about. So it's well worth it. You guys should definitely check those out. But continuing on, early on, Elvgren tore out magazine covers and individual pages, learning illustration by artists he admired or who interested him, which became his ritual. These pages became a comprehensive collection that would later influence both his painting technique and his approach to particular commissions. So something to talk about real quick over here. That is a really important thing to do. I think as somebody who's aspiring to become an illustrator, to become an artist, not just to make money, not just to make themselves a name or whatever, but just to keep the fire burning. It's an excellent way to do that by collecting things, putting them up on the wall, looking at them every day, admiring the stuff so that you can continue to feel motivated. There's always going to be roadblocks. There are going to be bad days. There's going to be things that you're going to go through mentally as you're leveling up, as you're trying to improve, that are going to be deterrents. So it's good to surround yourself by things that really keep the spirits going. You're looking at this stuff and you're like, oh, this is so amazing. I want to, create content like this or something similar, or be in this field. Look at what putting in effort produces. So it's something that it's crucial. Surround yourself with this stuff, and it'll inspire you to keep going. All right, so continuing on, Elvgren shared his admiration for the Brandywine School of Philosophy, of paintings with Norman Rockwell. So two names that are really important. First of all, Brandywine School of illustrators. That's a really important one. And I'm going to go into a little bit of a description of who created the Brandywine School of Philosophy, and how much influence that person had on pretty much all these artists, all the artists that I've mentioned earlier that inspired Gil Elvgren, himself, the Brandywine School, and other artists to follow. It's really important. The creator of the Brandywine School of Philosophy is Howard Pyle, and his work is also really incredible. In fact, it goes back to 1800s, but art that is created now is still using his contributions. For example, his depiction of what pirates look like was used to create the look for Johnny Depp's outfit in Pirates of the Caribbean. So Howard Pyle was really responsible for that sort of depiction of what pirates look like, and it went on to influence many. So just going a little bit more into the history, the development of glamour illustration in the 20th century was the result of an earlier growth in commercial art as painting techniques continued to develop and improve. Now also remember, in that period, photography wasn't amazing. I mean, you could even see just from some of the photographs that you're seeing from Gil Elvgren, like he at that point already probably had like really professional cameras, but they were limited. They were limited in terms of what it looks like, and compared to what iPhones are able to take, and the quality of that outcome is huge difference. So painting and illustration had a lot more presence in commercial for everything, whether it was like TV advertisements, billboards, labels, whatever you could think of. It wasn't so much photography, it was a lot more to do with illustration. So but aside from that, despite now photography being really big, something that photography doesn't do is create style, visual style. As you see here, this is still very stylized despite it having realism. There's something about it that taking a photograph in a real world wouldn't be able to produce. So whether photography or the equipment gets really amazing, it can't substitute the creative output from an artist and the style that they have. And considering each and every artist has their own style and has their own unique visual products, I think it's something that can't be substituted. Especially now with these like AI photos as well, like that you're seeing, they're not really voices of anybody, it's just an algorithm. So that's something that AI can't even substitute. Despite some of the results looking really good, it's not coming from an artist's generated concept. So that neither can that scenario really substitute illustration, painting. So, all right, going on. Within 10 years of Pyle's first published illustration, the American public was introduced to the first real pinup. This idealized all-American creation, blending the girl next door with the girl of your dreams, was called Into Life in Boston about 1887 by the pen of Charles Donna Gibson, who was president from 1867 to 1944. So just a quick recap of that. That was the very first pinup girl when it comes to American illustration. So Charles Donna Gibson was the one who created the Gibson girl, basically. And from there, it all spun out. Like there were, people were enamored, by the outcome, what it looked like, his style, and it was everywhere. I mean, if you guys look at it, or if you watch the first stream of Gil Elvgren, part 1, you'll get a better understanding of what that is. So I'm not going to get too further into Gil Elvgren. I'd like to continue to talk about his influences. And of course, you guys can catch up on all that from the previous streams if you follow through with it. you'll hear more about each and every one of those artists, and basically the history of that time period. I'm gonna show you guys Howard Pyle. So he was basically responsible for the Brandywine School philosophy, and his approach was very different. It wasn't technical. He wasn't really going into specific details and teaching people that anatomy and such. His approach was more philosophical. He inspired people through ideas and conversation and concepts, and he took people out into nature and he taught them to draw while being surrounded by nature, and trying to give this more of like this natural sort of I'm gonna say spiritual approach to painting, to inspire and create awe through conversation, through ideas, through realizations, and yeah, just kind of went from there. And you'll hear, like, as I go through a lot of these other artists who were inspired by him, quote him and talk about what that process was like, what the classes were like with him, and that's yet to come. There's an artist specifically who was a huge fan of Howard Pyle, who I will talk about later. Let me see here where. I'm going to talk about Howard Pyle real quick. So 1853 to 1911. He was an illustrator and author. In 1894, he began teaching illustration at the Drexel Institute of Art, Science and Industry, now Drexel University. After 1900, he founded his own school of art and illustration and named the Howard Pyle School of Illustration Art. Let's see, I'm not going to go way more into it. His 1883 classic publication, The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood, remains in print. He's also well known for his illustrations of pirates and is credited with creating what has become the modern stereotype of pirate dress. His work influenced the design of costumes for movie pirates, from Errol Flynn to Johnny Depp. Pyle was widely respected during his life and continues to be well regarded by illustrators and fine artists. His contemporary, Vincent van Gogh, wrote in a letter to his brother Theo that Pyle's work struck me dumb with admiration. His illustrations are vivid and imaginative, yet not entirely fantastic or contrived, lending them an air of colorful realism. He was also a brief student at the Art Students League of New York. Also a really important school, still present, and you guys can actually go there and take classes. There are no requirements aside from being able to pay for very, very affordable classes. So that was just like a brief overview to get you guys more familiar with this really important name. And I'm going to continue and introduce you guys to a new artist today. This is another artist that has influenced Gil Elvgren, and his name was James Montgomery Flagg. So I'm going to pause this real quick while I talk to you guys about him. As you could see, for those of you who have been following, his work is kind of similar to Charles Donna Gibson. You know, it's pen work, the style of how he's creating these scenes. It's kind of similar. It's of course it's still his own style to it. The way he draws faces, the way he draws features, the subject matter, you know, the angles and such. That's all pretty much his unique style. So here is more about James Montgomery Flagg. So 1877 to 1960. So just to give you guys, that's why I keep mentioning the era. I think it's really important because it did pave the way for illustration. You could kind of see how things continued to to trickle from there, you know, that it's all connected in some way. It isn't just like an error and then it passes and then nobody really cares or talks about it. They still continue, as you've heard, Howard Pyle back to like 1811, still continue to influence artists today. So they just kind of continue to pave that direction, and they paved it for each other as well. For those of you who have been following along, there are a lot of companies that hired these artists, and from generation to generation, basically, you know, continuing on that direction of using illustrators to create content. Okay, so he was an artist, a comic artist and illustrator. He worked in mediums ranging from fine art painting to cartoons, but he's best remembered for his political posters, particularly his 1917 poster, Uncle Sam. So if you guys ever seen that, you know, I Want You, that poster, that's James Montgomery Flagg. That's his work. He used his own face, adding age and a goatee. So it's him. It's actually him in that painting. Flagg was also a student at the Art Students League of New York for 4 years before heading to Europe to study painting in London and Paris. In 1900, he returned to the US, where he became a productive and ambitious artist, working for all the outstanding publications of his time. The magazine Judge featured his gouache painting of pretty girls, stylistically comparable to Charles Donna Gibson's art. In 1903, Flagg created his first comic strip, Nervy Nate, which is 1903 to 1909, for Judge. The series stars Nate, a sneaky, mustached beggar who often runs in with the law. Nat was drawn with a bulbous nose and wears a high hat and tailcoat. So let's see how far that is. Yeah, it's a little bit, that's ways away, I'm gonna say. So I'm gonna get back to this right after I give you guys a better, well, that's it right there. That is Nervy Nat, basically. That's the comic book. And the controversy there is that he based this off of an actor, and I'll get into that now. Actually, I'll just talk about it since it's up on screen. So because of these characteristic traits, author Tim Tresswell suggested in his book Tramp in America that Nervy Nat might have taken inspiration from comedian W.C. Fields. While there are physical similarities between the two, there is one major difference. Nervy Nat had a mustache. Nervy Nat has a mustache. There's also no proof whether Flagg was familiar with Fields at the time. So that's something to consider, actually. This is something that I talked about before when it comes to painting, when it comes to drawing. Using your environment, you know, or using things that you're seeing as inspiration and changing some things about it here and there to kind of create and make it your own. I'm going to say in this case, it's a little bit too similar, but it's not a big deal because, again, this is a comic book. So it's not like he's trying to be a comedian like W.C. Fields and use his content within his work or something. He's just using the appearance of the character and he's creating comics with that. So I'm going to show you guys here what W.C. Fields looks like, and you kind of saw it briefly as I was like flipping through this stuff. But just before I do that, I think this is a kind of a funny comic. You know, it's just him seeing this woman who's walking her dog and she's dressing up her dog. So he came up with this idea of like, oh, I'm going to dress up my pig. I have a pig at home. So he like did the same thing. He kind of wanted to mimic high society sort of behavior or whatnot. And he's walking it and all of a sudden the pig just goes wild and causes problems. And as you can see, he runs into a cop. I guess takes him in. So that's it. You know, this is W.C. Fields, and you could see, just flipping back here, you know, when you're looking at the first panel, it's pretty similar. You know, it's a pretty similar likeness to it. So it's hard to say that Flagg wasn't familiar with Fields at the time. I mean, the resemblance is very, very close, aside from that mustache. So that's one of his like earlier comics. Let's see if there's like other ones here. Oh, you guys will see all this other stuff as well. So going on, between February and September of 1912, Flagg drew a picture series, The Adventures of Kitty Cobb. And I'm going to switch to that. That's it right here. Which appeared in major U.S. Sunday newspapers. It told the adventures of a pretty girl and her struggles in the big city. The work is historically interesting because it gives a good impression of what the treatment of women in the early 20th century was like. Although Flagg was progressive in his portrayal of a young woman and ambitious working girl, it remains a product of its time. So, you know, there are certain things that are being said that in modern day we would just be like, oh, that's pretty sexist. But yeah, again, it's a product of its time, and it was considered to be progressive, what he was going for. So anyways, going on, Kitty causes mayhem wherever she goes. She is portrayed as a clumsy woman, unsuitable to do the hard and difficult work. Her good looks always bring out the worst in male behavior. Many male characteristics are either distracted by her, don't take her seriously, or try to seduce her. At the time, Kitty Cobb was nevertheless very popular. That's a pretty cool concept, I'm going to say. It's a really interesting one. It's something different. It's still grounded in real life, but it's a comic book concept. It's a comic book strip in a way. But the interesting thing is, and one of the reasons why I included this, is because it's not very much different from modern day. As much as we'd like to say progressive, like, look at what's going on right now. It's absolutely ridiculous, and people have reverted to being complete idiots, where they're now praising Nazis, you know. So this is kind of like history repeating itself, but people just look different, and they have fancy equipment and more fancy distractions, basically. But their ideologies, that the general public's idea of how things should be, is very much stuck in this really stupid state, you know, where things like this are still happening. For example, what they were saying, it's women weren't taken seriously, or they were like being hit on, or they're distracted by the looks. You know, they find that to be problematic. I'm going to say the biggest difference is that we have female politicians now, decision makers. You know, women were part of that. But still, considering that things have reverted back to a lot of this stuff, and a lot of the sexist concepts where they're saying a woman can't even decide how to use her own body, that's ridiculous. So it's kind of interesting to see how, even though this says that it's of its time, there's still a lot of similarity to that time, despite it being like I'm going to say 1910, so it's been over 100 years. You know, it's been like 110 years basically, and still 110 years, just picture that, 110 years, and still the same stupid concepts are dominating mainstream culture. That just says how much we have to actually change things around. You know, that we have to collectively come together and start to push for change that's going to be signed into law. We have to like kick people out. You know, these are all decisions made by old people. That's one of the reasons why we haven't really progressed, is because the people in charge, they're 60, 70 years old. So they're of the era of that time. And what they're doing is they're brainwashing people who are young to appease them. You know, like they're basically saying, hey, if you appease us, if you act like us, if you do what we tell you to, and you believe in the things that we tell you to, you're going to get our position. So they're perpetuating these problems. This isn't like some sort of innate thing. It's not some sort of innate thing for kids of a certain type or whatever. This is taught, this is perpetuated by old people. So these old farts who don't belong in our modern day economy and the outlook that most people have. The way that people interact now is way more progressive. I'm going to say it's just that politics and the media and how what it chooses to surface and present is kind of setting the tone in a way. But we don't have that huge level of segregation. There's people of all cultures interacting with each other, working with each other, etc. It's just this like underlying current of ignorance that's popping up. But anyways, yeah, we just got to kick out all these old farts and their pawns. Basically, all these kids were pawns for them. They're just young vessels continuing on the same mistakes that have been made. We got to boot them out. We really got to come together and do something about this. It's ridiculous. I'm reading this stuff and I'm outraged that still to this day we're having the same stupid problems 110 years later. All right, anyways, in 1913, Flagg created another picture series about a young woman, a girl better known as Dorothy Perkins. So that's 1913 to 1914. The series started a middle-class girl, Dorothy Perkins, who is spoiled by an overindulgent mother. In 1946, Flagg published his autobiography, Roses and the Buckshot. The book gained infamy since the artist is quite outspoken about his profession and certain colleagues in one chapter. In one chapter, he reflects on cartoonists with the following words. I'm fond of cartoonists, yet they are a very intelligent race of men, except that they have a curious complex. They all think they can draw. They are quite sincere in this delusion, even to the point of calling their office studios, and they have models, which is very nice. In America, next to baseball, comics are funnies have become the most popular of our obsession. I'm looked upon as a leper because I dislike both of those things. I can hardly wait on Sunday morning to get the papers so that I can take the funnies and stuff them in the scrap basket. Naturally, there's something wrong with me. 130 million people can't be that wrong, maybe. So he's kind of like playing on words here, and he's just being like sarcastic, I'm going to say, because obviously by the looks of his work, he's also a comic book artist. He does some cartoons. If you look at Nervy Net, he's also a cartoon character. So he's just kind of, I guess, poking these contemporaries with a stick and just mocking them, while also being like, hey, would I really mean this if I'm doing all this work that's very similar to yours? I think he was just being boisterous. He doesn't mean it, and he's not sincere about it, but it did, I guess, stir up some controversy, and people were, of course, like gossiping about it, and like, I can't believe they said that. But that pretty much does it, y'all. That's James Montgomery Flagg. You guys kind of got an idea of his personality, but also I like the subject matters, the things that he's bringing up, because they're sort of philosophical. They make you think about stuff like the idea of a girl who's being spoiled by her mother, a girl who is an everyday woman, who's attractive, and she is going through life, and you kind of get a glimpse into that. You step into their shoes through these comics, and you get to see what's going on. And that's kind of like what you're seeing here in The Adventures of Kitty Cobb, the one that is trying to just live her life as a person, as opposed to like this attractive female, and how she's coming across these problems. So you could see coworkers there, and they have these like snobby expressions on their face looking at her, while the manager, I'm guessing the manager, or probably somebody who is there, is enamored by her, so they're just like jealous of it. And of course that's like a really toxic environment, and it's frustrating. So I could see how that becomes a really annoying scenario. guess he's the attention of the floor walker. Much to the envy and disgust of the other girls, Mr. Tripper asks her to the theater. So yeah, they get super jealous about it. But this isn't as much as I could find, which kind of sucks, because I would like to get like a full issue and see what the Adventures of Kitty Cobb was like. Or I'm gonna say Nervy Net is more of like a Sunday newspaper thing. It's amusing, but I'm gonna say that these other ones are more interesting because they're kind of grounded and they do have these like real world scenarios. And also note that that's what James Montgomery Flagg decided to do. He decided to do it about a woman. He's not, obviously not a sexist person, and he's not too focused on this like gender idea, and he's more focused on like a human experience. So I like that about his work. I like that that's his choice. This is another example here. The Adventures of Kitty Cobb. And this is his work. And that's actually him in there, despite it kind of looking different. But it's hard to say what he actually looked like because this photo is so old. But that is a painting that you guys are all familiar with. So just remember, you guys learned today who created that painting, and you got a better idea of him. I also really like this drawing here. This idea that's something that we're currently struggling with, how pretty much most of these countries are run by people who are basically evil. The things that is happening in Iran, the fact that women are being killed and that people who are protesting and saying, let us live and have and enjoy our life, they're being killed for that, which is absolutely ridiculous. A woman is being beaten to death because of the way that she's dressed. That's absurd. That's like some sort of like, I don't know, early 200s AD or something. That's some sort of story that you would hear in that time period. But it's still going on now in some of these countries, so I think it's just kind of interesting. And also, I think it's a good depiction of like capitalism, how capitalism is dominating the entire planet, and there's only a certain amount of people who are willing to fight against it and fight for good, basically. And I think that number just has to rise, and people have to really take matters into their own hands. It's because of apathy, and it's because of this like complicit sort of culture that people are living in, that things are going downwards. And I think that's all systematic. I think this idea that people are complicit, it's because they've created a system that dangles toys in front of people's eyes, whether it's through social media and people are stuck on it for hours, or they create new iPhones or phones or little gadgets, basically just saying, hey, look at this real cool thing, just distract yourself with this while we just basically create all these repulsive scenarios of like sex trafficking and child labor and child abuse and exploiting the planet, drilling oil and displacing a lot of like native people around there who are just living a peaceful life, and just killing people, bombing areas. It's absurd, all that. But they're doing it because they're just like, hey, pay attention to this dangling little toy that we have in front of you. Like, look at this new series, look at this magazine talking about Desperate Housewives or whatever. And people are like, oh yeah, that's cool, let me focus on that. And instead of actually being like, no, get out, get the fuck out of the White House, get the fuck out of our political system and economical decisions. We don't like you. You're a terrible person. You make bad decisions. Get out. I think that's really what the message should be. That's what people should be focusing on all over the world, because we're seeing this corruption and abuse and, all this negligence that caused the pandemic. All that is done because of corrupt people who don't care about anything other than themselves. They don't care about anything other than money, power, and fame. So anyways, I think this kind of really sums it up. I think it's a really good painting, and it's called Life. It's people who are just pushing back against these demonic creatures basically who are trying to just destroy the planet. All right, moving on. Let's move on to the next painting. Beautiful work. You know, again, it's something that I think is unique about art and illustration, is that in this, for example, it's not hyper realistic, but the way that he was able to draw and create all these lines really breathes life into it. There's like fluidity towards this painting, towards this drawing. The way that he created these lines, he brought life to each and every one of those lines. When it comes to the hair, you know, just how he was able to render all this stuff, and just some of the shadow lines as well. Like if you look at the nose, right around where the nostril is and going up towards the bridge of the nose, like there's some interesting lines there that don't look really technical, but they're just in the right place in order to bring life to it. Beautiful, beautiful illustration. So here's another one. That's a girl, you know. This is the one that is about a spoiled woman by her mother, who's also spoiled as well. And that's another story. Which would be pretty cool to know what the themes were, what the scenarios were. It just sucks so bad. There are no prints of this, and it was really difficult to just find this. As you could see, it's like a photo of a photo. But just to give you guys an idea of it, here I'm gonna say this is Kitty Cobb, The Adventures of Kitty Cobb again, of an attractive woman and how other women are kind of looking at her in either admiration or envy. But I think the pen work is amazing. I really do enjoy it, and you could see again in comparison to like Charles Donna Gibson, how much influence they've had. And if you guys have been following along, you could see how each of these artists really appreciated one another, but there is a certain focus for each and every one of them. For example, with Gil Elvgren, it's Had an Age Sunblum. Huge influence. If you guys go back to that artist, you will see how much influence he had over Gil Elvgren. I'm going to say for Norman Rockwell, it was J.C. Leyendecker. You could see the resemblance in their work, and despite that, they're still very much unique to their own right. You know, they're not just copying or whatever. It's very much, you could see the influence, but you could see how they just took it to another level, took it to something more unique to their for their own voice. And as you could see, James Montgomery Flagg is influenced by Charles Donna Gibson. So each and every artist, again, this is what's beautiful about art in general. Each artist has their own voice and their own creativity, their own subject matter, and their own outcome. And that's what makes it so fascinating, to be able to explore that. Here there's more. Well, you guys kind of seen that actually. How much he took time to render out all this stuff. And it's also cool to see, again, this is like a glimpse into time. You know, this is like going back and seeing what people used to dress like. You know, what was the aesthetic, just going back to here and seeing what the garbs were like, what the furniture was like at that time. It's just really cool to get into that and observe all that stuff. But I'm gonna say this is probably it for James Montgomery Flagg. There wasn't that much for me to collect. I think this is kind of like, well, what really grabbed my attention were all these pieces. So there wasn't that much of it. So I'm just gonna spend more time giving you guys a better understanding of James Montgomery Flagg, I believe. there's like a section here talking about Gil Elvgren where it mentions James Montgomery Flagg. Okay, so going back to the Gibson Girl, which I was talking about, was done by Charles Donna Gibson, who influenced James Montgomery Flagg. Quickly becoming the sweetheart of America, the Gibson Girl was depicted primarily in pen and ink drawings. Her success was so overwhelming that Gibson Girl drawings were soon seen on front covers and as two-page centerfolds in such popular magazines as Life and Collier. The single female of the early drawings developed into a group of females, then a man and a woman, or mixed groups. The male figure, known as the Gibson Man, was enthusiastically taken up by the admirers of the Gibson Girl. By 1900, the Gibson Girl and the Gibson Man had attained unprecedented international popularity. The image of the Gibson Girl was seen almost everywhere throughout the United States and Europe. Gibson's drawings were published and reproduced as prints, lithos, calendars, centerfolds, and magazine covers, as well as numerous advertising specialty products with such as playing cards, notepads, ink bottlers, blotters, and ladies' fans. Even wallpaper, fine china, jewelry boxes, and umbrellas carried the pictures. So that's how renowned that was, and that's how much of a big deal it was at that time, as an introduction to pinup. I'm going to say that was like the pinup art of that era. The Gibson Girl enchanted more than one generation of Americans. Though she had her beginning in the early Art Nouveau period, she was still going strong in the Roaring 20s as a flapper, jitterbugging and dancing the Charlton in damn, I can't read my own writing here. In speakeasies. Gibson updated the style and manner of his drawings and the fashion in them to enchant a new audience during the Art Deco era, which is 1920 to 1930. And that's a really important era as well. It's something that's I'm going to be talking about in another special intro that's not connected to Gil Elvgren. So just remember that Art Deco era is from 1920 to 1930. So let's move on to more specific. So another member of the Gibson Christie Fisher Club of glamour artists was James Montgomery Flagg. He painted many mainstream subjects, as did the others in the group, but the focus of his work was painting pictures of beautiful women. He became legendary for his classic World War I recruiting poster, Uncle Sam. Flagg was excellent with the pen and ink, which impressed Elvgren, who, despite never using this medium, he nonetheless appreciated Flagg's and Gibson's talent for brilliant line drawings. Many of the leading illustrators who directly influenced Elvgren as his career began to take shape in the 1930s were students of Howard Pyle. So this is something that I was talking about earlier. That's why I mentioned him at the beginning of the stream, since he'll be a reoccurring name. Howard Pyle's Brandywine School. Right, he was a student of Howard Pyle's Brandywine School. Chief among them was, I'm going to say, this is the next artist. Harvey T Dunn, 1884 to 1952. So Harvey T Dunn was Pyle's protege and most accomplished student. Dunn also became an influential teacher who passed on his own form of Pyle's philosophy to hundreds of artists. So let's just talk about it real quick. Let's talk about him. I don't think there's that much on him either. I couldn't really find that much information. But yeah, I think he will Well, actually, yeah, there's a little bit actually on him. So Harvey T Dunn, 1884 to 1952, was an American painter and teacher. He's best known for his what does this say? I'm going to say his crazy intimate magnum opus, The Prairie. Oh, it's Prairie. His prairie intimate magnum opus, The Prairie is My Garden. In the painting, a mother and her 2 children are out gathering flowers with the quintessential prairie of the Great Plains. So I'm going to go back real quick. I'm going to show you guys what... Uh-oh. Is it here, or is it very separate? Yeah, it's separate. This is it. That is, that's what he's the most famous for. It's actually a really beautiful painting. I mean, there's so much complexity to that as far as colors go. Just look at that. And I want to say it's very similar to like Impressionism. You know, because it's not incredibly detailed. As you can see, it's not like every single strain of grass is drawn and, you know, separated or whatever. This is more of just mixing colors in ways and just kind of giving you the impression and the idea that it is there with some detail here and there, which is really well done. You know, it's done in a way where it's all cohesive. It all kind of works together. There isn't anything that really steals your attention. Or is incredibly sharp in focus. You know, you could see that the subject matter is there. It's the mother and her children. They're collecting flowers in this plain. But all of it works well. Like the background, including the subject, they're all one basically. But what I really like about his painting is actually. The complexity to all the colors, and there's a certain texture, I'm gonna say, like looking at their skin, right? It really does seem, this is another instance of so well rendered, it looks real, but it doesn't. It's like right in between. It's surfing that middle ground, kind of. It looks more real than real, I wanted to say, really. Like there's something about it that really pops out. More so than if you were to just like take a photo, and I think that has to do with like the texture, like how the paint is just applied onto the canvas. It's not incredibly smooth. There's some volume to it, and I think because of that, it kind of pops out more. It has more life to it than I would say a photo. And I also really like that it captures a moment, that it's not like they're looking directly into the camera as if though like you're present, you know, you're a watcher or something. It's kind of like capturing a moment of a person and how they're feeling without them actually paying attention to the viewer, you know. So it's a real moment, you know. It's something that genuinely happens. It's not a pose. It's not artificial in some way. So I think that's also what makes it such a beautiful painting as well. But yeah, going on, Dunn was one of a small group of Pyle's defining students who were to revolutionize the illustration world, and today are collectively known as the Brandywine School. After 2 years with Pyle, Dunn established his own studio and immediately began a successful career in illustration. He was a prodigious painter, able to produce 55 complete paintings in a week for various clients. In 11 Is that 11 or is that a quote? Sorry, it's my crappy writing. Yeah, it's a quote. So, in a week of various clients, a contemporary described his style in these terms. He literally attacked the canvas, and sometimes I thought he was to impale the painting with his brush. So he's like really aggressive, I guess, when he would paint, or it was just the speed, at which he was painting. But as you could see, it still brought about something really amazing. As Dunn grew in stature as an illustrator, he became interested in helping other artists, as Ada Caldwell and Howard Pyle had helped him. In 1915, Dunn and fellow artist Charles Shepard Chapman established the Leonia School of Illustration. Leonia School of Illustration. All that I'm really doing is carrying on Howard Pyle's idea. This is a quote from Dunn. Howard Pyle did not teach art, and this is something I was talking about earlier about Howard Pyle and what his technique was. Howard Pyle did not teach art. Art cannot be taught any more than life can be taught. His main purpose was to quicken our souls that we might render services to the majesty of simple things. So as you could see, like, that really was the approach. It was more of this like intuitive sort of inspiring people to be more connected spiritually, more connected with concepts and ideas, rather than being really, really technical. I don't fully agree. I do think that you could actually teach art to some degree. I'm not going to say completely, but you can teach the skills and inspire people to pursue the field more and more until they find their voice, until they find more interest in whatever it is. So I'm kind of like, I don't know. I see what they're talking about, but I don't fully agree. I do think that it can be taught to some degree, to some extent, not completely. Dunn was not interested in teaching painting techniques. His approach was philosophically oriented. He spoke about spirit, emotions, and discourse at length. He discussed his philosophy of life and art, offered group criticism, and strode from easel to easel, discussing each student's work in turn. Dunn also taught at the Art Students League of New York. So here's yet another person. This is how long the Art Students League has been around. I mean, it's been around since the early 1800s, or like mid 1800s, I'm going to say. And it had so many people attend that school and connect with one another through it. So once again, highly encourage you guys to check it out if you're really into the field. It's a fun environment. And it really just includes everybody who's interested in it. It doesn't really specify things only to academic results, like how you would see some of these colleges where you need a specific grade point average or whatever it is to be able to attend it. There, it's just if you're interested and you could pay and you respect their approach, then you can attend those classes and learn a lot. But just going through, I'm going to spend some time showing you guys another piece of his illustration. I really love this about his work. Unlike the previous ones that you guys have seen, his themes are a little bit more, I'm going to say, adventurous. I don't know if that's a good way to describe it, but there's more to it. Like, it's not really connected to modern society in some way. There's a little bit more wonder to it. And I guess the themes are different here. You could see that it's like something to do with the Wild West in a way, right? And his work is really expressive. Like, if you take a look at the floor in the shadows, right, it's not incredibly polished stuff that you've seen. Like, for example, Elvgren's work is way more polished than this. this is a little bit more chaotic, and that's kind of what I guess the client was talking about when they were saying like he attacked the canvas and he thought he was going to impale the canvas with his brush. You could see that in this painting pretty well. Like, despite that though, it's still pretty well rendered. Like, if you look at his vest, it's not incredibly defined, but it's defined enough for it to just look pretty realistic. His pants as well, like, there aren't really incredibly definitive lines there, but they're placed in such a way where you could see that the pants are turning according to like his body movement, right? There's like complexity also in his color choices, which I also love, and I think that's what really makes these paintings also so unique. Is as you saw in a previous painting, there's just a lot going on over there. Just in the pants alone, there's like yellow, green, blue, grays, all of them kind of like mixed in. Purples, there's some purples there as well, and it works well. There's nothing that really calls your attention, but they're still present there. Looking at his foot, like unlike Norman Rockwell, for example, right? Like, if you remember how he was drawing shoes, super realistic, like incredible. But here it's still done in a way where it doesn't look like an amateur drawing. It's not like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's doing and he's just kind of putting blotches. Like, it's very intentional. All of his brush strokes have a purpose, have rhyme and reason to them. Looking at the horse, looking at the horse that's towards the back further, just looking at the face, you could see so much complexity and color when it comes to the face there as well. And I'm still like enamored by it, like just how they're able to do that. And if you guys have seen me work with India inks when it comes to coloring comics on Wednesdays, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I spend a lot of time mixing colors and trying to get the color that I'm looking for. But here there's just multitudes of them, and it all works well. It all connects. The horse is a perfect example of them. In fact, both of them. If you were to just take some time and study and pay attention to all the little sections and notice what kind of colors are used, or just try to come up with color schemes for it, it's very complicated. There's a lot going on over there. But aside from that, I think the composition is great. The subject matter is fun. It's something to do with, I guess, bandits trying to break in. I can't tell because he's pointing up a gun at the top, which is weird. Like, what is he exactly pointing with his gun to? But interesting, like, body language there. I also really like the body language and color composition. What kind of colors are being used? There's a lot of turquoise and blue and yellow throughout the entire painting. You could see it in the mountains. There's some yellows there. There's some like orange, reds. And that's also present in the outfit of the guy who's trying to open the door. You could see the yellows and the greens and reds. There's like little slivers of red there. So it just shows that he unifies the colors all around, not just in the mountains, not in certain sections. It's in every single part of the painting. Like, the guys that are on the horse also have those colors as well. You could see it in their jackets. There's that turquoise, gray, green, yellow, and red all throughout his outfit, including around his wrist as well. If you notice, there's a little bit of that red. So it just circles through and comes back to the top of to the top where the mountains are. It's all included. All right, so that's that. I'm gonna get back to this. Yeah, his painting is very moody, I'm gonna say too. Like, there's some sort of dream quality to it, I'm gonna say, from each and every one of these. But let me just go back to that one. Here in comparison, let's say to McClellan Barkley, right? He had a similar kind of, I'm gonna say a slightly similar rendering style, but there were very vibrant colors and there was that contrast between the background and the foreground and the people. Whereas here, even though they're rendered out in a way that pop out, like you could see that she pops out, her face pops out, and he has a lot of form as well. There's complexity in her dress. They're still blended in with everything else. It doesn't really call out as much, but it has a very interesting mood to it, which is what I really like about this painting. It's a cool combination, I want to say, of like realism and impressionism. Like he melded that pretty well together. And you could see also in the background, the people aren't really defined as much. They're just suggested there. Like if you look at the couple at the top left, they're kind of melded into one another to say that they're like embracing each other. He has his arm around her waist, she has her arm around his neck. But it's not incredibly defined. It just kind of sets the tone that they're having a moment in this like social environment. It seems like this guy is like super interested in a woman, and she's I don't know, she's somewhere else. But it has this very dreamy sort of quality to it, which I really dug. Similar to this as well, you know, I'm gonna say it also has that sort of feel. Also a good example of like his impressionistic style, especially when you look at the clouds. It's not hyper realistic, but notice something that I actually am noticing now, and I think it's intentional. Take a look at the clouds right above the ox, right in the middle, smack in the middle. What do you see there? I'm seeing two eyes. So it has this like spiritual quality to it. It has this idea of a divine spirit, right? It's a very, very interesting way of doing it. But if you look at the rest of the clouds, they're not super realistically rendered. It's just brushstrokes combined together all around, and it just convinces you that those are clouds. You know, that's the interesting thing about his style, is that it's very chaotic, but unifying at the same time. Like, you know what he's doing because you could see the guy, and the composition is there, the body language is there. You know, it's not off balance. You could see that he's like holding it properly, and his body suggests that he's in pretty good control over it. And the way that he rendered the oxes as well, like, you know, you could see that he's really on top of it. You know, he's not just splashing colors around with his brush. It's very intentional, but also, as I mentioned, pretty chaotic. Just looking at the bottom right, like looking at all the grass that's there, not a lot of detail there, but good use of color. Their tonal range is very close. You know, that red that you see at the bottom left, it's not too far away from the green. You know, the green isn't incredibly vibrant, and the red isn't incredibly vibrant. The warmth of the colors is very close. So that's an important thing to take note of. That's something that helps unify a painting. And also the yellows that you see all around as well. So just incredible work. Here is another example of like this kind of dreamy scene. You know, it's not, he doesn't have trouble with detail. Like, you could see the guy at the left corner, but he's not way too into detail. And in fact, the environment around him as well, that's not a lot of detail. You can't really tell what's going on over there. But her face is very much defined. You know, in fact, the lighting is really well done, you know, to show certain areas that are getting this like highlight from those lamps at the top. It's very cool. But also the dress itself, you know, so going from the face being so defined, and you could see these like very specific highlights, to looking at the dress, it's very chaotic. It doesn't have doesn't even have any boundaries to it. It just kind of seems like it's bleeding into the painting or its surroundings. It's like connected with everything around. So again, it's this like really cool combination of both, you know, impressionism and realism combined together. And I think that's one of his unique qualities, is not just that combination of style, but mood that he brings out with each and every one of these paintings. You know, from going to that scene with everything being really blue, you know, it having this like melancholy sort of vibe to it, to having this sort of scene. It almost seems angelic, right? If you want to look at it that way. His face has some sort of like, I'm going to say some sort of mesmerized expression, you know, almost like he can't believe he doesn't believe what he's looking at. And with her having this sort of like, ethereal, if that's the word that I'm looking for, vibe to it, like this angelic quality because of this like, glow that she has all around, right? Since he doesn't really define the dress that much, and the other stuff that's around her, it has this certain emanating sort of vibe about her. And I want to say that the shawl that she's wearing, the see-through shawl, also could suggest wings a little bit. So I'm gonna go with that. I think it's this like, again, it's this like spiritual concept combined, as you saw in the other one where the guy was like holding the oxes and like mowing through or whatever, collecting the harvest. There was the presence of God, the eye, right? The eye of the beholder was present in the clouds. It looked very specific, I'm gonna say, so I don't think that it's an accident or it's a coincidence there. It's very much that. So he combines all those things, the impressionism and realism, the mood, this like spiritual sort of vibe. That's really, really unique. Here, I think this is another example of just that. This sort of like wonder, you know, of existence. Somebody who's just laying and checking out the stars. No phones. You know, something also to take note of, like how different life was. Totally far away from any social media or any sort of distraction, just being out in the open and observing nature and just having this like curiosity for existence and surrounding and environment, you know, looking up into the sky and just seeing how majestic and unfathomable this whole existence really is, you know, just being in this planet, I guess, when there's so much going on outside of it. You know, there's like all this other stuff that isn't connected to politics, that isn't connected to social media or how cool you are or whatever. It's this like complete and unknowable, chaotic, beautiful thing that just exists. And I think a lot of times we neglect that. We get so caught up in all this other you know, man-made stuff and all this like social construct that we kind of forget about how amazing and how limitless existence is, how limitless and how much there is to see and discover outside even this planet. You know, there's so much to even discover within this planet. But to think that all these other galaxies and, you know, planets that are out there and what's going on over there, it kind of sucks. Like, that's where I guess I get my FOMO from. It's like, you know, there's all that to see. And am I going to get a chance to see it? You know, it kind of sucks. But at the same time, it's really amazing to just try to come up even with what is going on out there. Like, what's happening in that reality. But I think this kind of illustrates that well. You know, he does, the way he draws this guy's or paints this guy's face, it really shows wonder. You know, he's really wandering and just, he's completely lost in this like cosmic sort of exploration that he's having, accompanied by a friend and two friends, you know, his dog and dude next to him, I guess. And they're just chilling on this beach, or who knows. I'm gonna say it looks like a beach because it looks sandy, but it could be a field. All right, I'm gonna do one more. And I'm gonna end it here, guys. There's one more artist after Harvey T Dunn. So that's going to be a wrap, I'm going to say, for Gil Elvgren's influences. You guys are going to get to see me talk more about the book, but I'll get to that in just a minute. I just wanted to talk about this painting and how beautiful it is. I think he really was able to capture, I don't know, I guess there's like a certain wonder to it, and also there's like peacefulness to it. There's like so many different things that are going on over here. First off, very beautiful feminine depiction, right? Just within the hands, and I guess the curvature to pretty much everything. There's a certain level of sophistication, and there's a certain level of, what's the word that I'm looking for here? Sincerity. I'm going to say there's a certain level of sincerity. I don't think you would find expression like this, or you don't find much of it. Like through social media, there's so much artificial sort of expression, whereas I think this is a very genuine one, and it's something that really also has to do with the time period as well, I'm going to say, because not everybody was able to take photos at the time. You know, people didn't have phones, people didn't have cameras. So that sort of existence, this obsessiveness that we have now, selfies and taking pictures of everything and always and every day and multiple times a day, that didn't exist at that time period. And I think that also grounded people more to experience things, you know, not to be obsessed with themselves. Because essentially what we're doing right now, I think, is just kind of staring at the mirror. You know, it's like the equivalent of that, of a person who's just constantly looking at the mirror. With these selfies that people take, and you look at some of the profiles, and it's like the same, it's the person's face like 50 times or 60 times over and over and over again. There is a benefit to it, I'm going to say, but I think it's that over indulgence, the same way as televisions were. I'm going to say, like, when televisions first came out, everybody was obsessed and they were glued to TVs, whereas now people don't even have regular cable more. They're like just subscribing to certain things, and TV is kind of like faded out a bit. It's more about social media, people being on their phones, that sort of thing. So I'm gonna say it's a craze, you know, that people are overindulging in, and it's, in some ways, I think it brings about a little bit of that self-centeredness, where people are just way too focused on themselves. And capitalism kind of exacerbates that. You know, it talks about this whole self-promotion thing and what you need to do to get likes, and how you have to sell yourself, and people are just completely wrapped up in that. But I think this painting just kind of takes you out of that, or at least it takes me out of that, and just kind of puts me into a place of just being, just existing and feeling the vibes and feeling the environment and thinking about stuff, and just being alive and present, you know, not just constantly chasing one thing to another, just really being content. I'm gonna say that's another word that really shows in this painting, is her being very content and peaceful internally. There's a lot that face expression from this painting alone, it just shows, and also just very dreamy quality as well, like just from the background, not really seeing much there, and how it also works with her outfit, which is slightly different. You know, it's not completely without detail. There's all that complexity in the brush strokes that create folds. You know, like looking at that, there is no shadows really, right? And I guess that has something to do with light, but it's also exaggerated. Notice how there aren't any real dark colors, even around where her arm is resting on her body. You would think There's some dark lines there since no light is reached. But I think that kind of adds, or is the point, is that you want to focus on her face expression. You want to focus on the femininity of her hand. Just the overall vibe, as opposed to this very technical concept. But despite that, still technically amazing. You know, to begin to think of like how to make all those brush strokes with all those colors. It's incredible. I'm gonna say it's incredible work. So that's Harvey T Dunn, everybody. I'm gonna continue on next week. This is gonna be probably the last episode, or part 9 is probably gonna be the last of all the influences. I think the book had a couple of more people listed there, and I might venture into it at some point. But I will give you guys more glimpse into the book. I'm going to actually talk about Gil Elvgren. You know, after reviewing all these artists, I'm going to read through the entire thing, talking about him, his influences, all over again. So you guys get like the whole general scope of who he was. And then show you all the different eras. That's what's going to be really interesting to see, is that it's going from 20s, I'm going to say like 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. And you guys are going to get to see how that style changed, how his subjects changed, like how he presented them in more of like a sexual context. That also changed from year to year, you know, starting out from like the 20s, and what was acceptable back then was very different when, as opposed to like the 70s, right? Like when people were a lot more free-spirited, quote unquote, and easygoing. So it's going to be fun to just look through all that. And that's going to be a book. So it's not going to be so much this. And you guys are going to have a little bit more of an interactive, I guess, experience with it. But that pretty much does it, everybody, for tonight, for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I absolutely love talking about this. I love looking at the paintings themselves. You guys can, you know, just take your time and observe this with playing your own music, just looking at their art and, you know, muting all this other stuff and just observing it, because really that's what it's about. It's really to show you guys all these artists, and notice how like each and every one of them was so different, from J.C. Leyendecker to James Montgomery Flagg to Norman Rockwell to Harvey T Dunn. They're all very much unique, and they all have their own contribution, their own voice and aesthetic. All right, everyone, that does it. Thanks again for tuning in. If you guys enjoyed this content, just remember to hit that like and subscribe button. They're both greatly appreciated by me. And I hope you guys enjoy your weekend. I'll see you next week.